Hello, everyone. My name is Samalit Hogan with the Small Business Development Center Network, located here in Springfield, Massachusetts. We also have offices all throughout the state, and we provide free and confidential business advisory services. Today, it is my pleasure to moderate today's webinar with our speaker, Dawn LaRochelle from the Center for Women Enterprise. Before we get started, I want to acknowledge all of the partners that help us put together this free series of webinars, including all of the partners from the Western Mass Means Business Collaboration, including SCORE, the Center for Women Enterprise, Franklin County CDC, Common Capital, and of course, the Massachusetts Small Business Development Centers with locations at Salem State and UMass and Clark University. Last but not least, we want to thank our funders, several of our technical assistance providers that helped put together these webinars are funded with funds from Massachusetts Growth Capital Corporation. And then we are funded by the Small Business Administration and the state of Massachusetts. So thank you to all the funders and the partners that help put these webinars together free of charge for you to enjoy and learn and be able to improve the way you do business. And today's topic is conflict resolution in the workplace. And I'm going to do a brief introduction of our speaker today, Dawn LaRochelle. She is the current project manager with the Massachusetts Growth Capital Corporation, the COVID business recovery. That's what her main focus is over there. And she's a graduate from Duke University, Harvard Law School, and UMass Amherst Graduate School of Education. I tend to speak really fast sometimes, so I have to slow myself down. But Dawn has definitely all of the qualifications and great background to be able to speak to us today about this very important topic. She has extensive background in corporate and nonprofit law, business, and education. And after working in the litigation department of the Wall Street firm Milbank, Tweed, Tatley, and McCloy, and as a general counsel for human rights in China, she opened two acclaimed catering companies and an award-winning fine dining restaurant in Berkshire County, Massachusetts. So she's not only someone that comes to you with her own book smart, but she also has the experience to back it up as an entrepreneur. Before we go to Dawn, I wanted to do a few little minor, housekeeping details here. Please rename yourself, your first name and last name. That will help us better as we have the conversation today. And keep your mics muted while the speaker is presenting. You can unmute yourself at certain points in time where you can ask a question. If you are still having a little bit of trouble learning, remembering the buttons on your screen, here's the steps. It shows you the participants, how you can rename yourself, click in the participants, and then click in the drop-down menu to rename yourself, and then how you use the little microphone there to keep yourself muted. I'm very sure many of you have been to these webinars before, so I won't stay here too long. But for those of you who have a kind of weird name on the screen, please rename yourself. We really appreciate it. And then I also wanted to put up the names of all of the folks that are part of the collaboration here in Western Mass. And you can reach out to any of these folks. Dawn's email is right there, right under Michelle from the Center for Women and Enterprise. So you can reach out to her with questions, follow-up questions after today's presentation. And if you're looking for free and confidential business advisory services, many of the providers that I fashioned the screen offer, like the Center for Women Enterprise and SCORE. Also, the Small Business Development Center has offices all throughout the state. You can find our location on our website. So without further delay, I'm going to hand it off to Dawn. Please get us started today. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you so much, Sam, for that introduction. As you can all probably tell from that introduction, I've had a very, shall I say, nonlinear career path. I have worked at large corporations, educational institutions, small nonprofits. I've been an employee, I've been a manager, and I've owned my own business. In fact, we used to joke at my restaurant that our motto should have been, "We've got characters." We had all kinds of interesting people who worked there. So through it all, conflict has been a common thread. No matter what stage of career you're in, no matter where or for whom you work, Learning how to resolve differences and work productively with diverse personality types is critical to your professional success as well as your mental well-being. So therefore, there we go. I want to talk about how we can find ways to manage conflict, because conflict's always going to happen. We don't live in La La Land. There's no perfect universe. We're all going to come into conflict. And we're going to also learn how we can look at change and conflict resolution as our friend. So first, I'm going to talk about what the ingredients of conflict are. There are many. Here are some of the most common ones. One is working in a diverse environment. We all want to be in a diverse environment, right? Diversity is the buzzword of the day. But as soon as people are diverse, they're going to come into conflict. So what types of diversity might you have? One is people who think differently than you do. So one very typical example, particularly pre-COVID, was managers or bosses who believed strongly in FaceTime. You needed to be in that office tied to your desk from a certain hour to a certain hour in order to be considered working, as opposed to employees who felt they could be much more productive and have a better quality of life working from home with their fuzzy slippers on. So we'll see how much COVID has turned that on its head and what things are going to be like with this slow return to normal, if we'll still continue to have that conflict or whether working from home will be an accepted part of a productive work environment. Another, I guess, ingredient of diversity that can lead to conflict are people who are from different cultures and therefore have different styles of communication. And one very common example, Asian cultures, as well as many Latinx cultures, direct eye contact is considered rude. You don't do it. In the USA, avoiding direct eye contact is considered shifty. So how do you manage your own emotions when someone isn't doing exactly what you have been acculturated to believe is the right way to communicate? I have, again, a similar example with myself when I lived in Japan for many years. Japanese is a language that has numerous levels of politeness, and you actually change the way you conjugate and declinate words depending on the level of the person you're talking to. And because that just doesn't exist in English, I was not really good at what was called Keigo, these levels of politeness. And I just remember talking one time to a professor at the university I was at, and I was not using the correct level of politeness when I conjugated verbs. And I actually at one point looked at him, realized what I was doing, and the expression on his face, you could tell he was thinking, okay, she's American, she doesn't know any better. But at the same time, he was having a visceral reaction to the fact that I was using a type of language that he considered out and out rude. And then there's what we call the social similarity trap. That means you know someone's from the same neighborhood you were from, you grew up together, you went to the same school, therefore your immediate assumption is they have the same values, they have the same goals, they have the same outlooks you do. And when you have that assumption, and then that assumption turns out to be false, that leads to conflict. So those false assumptions based on what you perceive as social similarities can also lead to issues. There are also differences, severe opinions on polarizing issues. One big word for y'all, politics. It's become such that it's difficult to discuss politics at the dinner table together with people who have differing points of view. I'm sure many of us have had the experience of being unfriended on social media by people who hold different viewpoints than we do. So having differences of opinions can be a source of great conflict, particularly when those issues are polarizing, like politics. Speaking in absolutes, you're with us or you're against us. You're my way or the highway. Hey, there's a women's march taking place on this day. You're either going to participate in this Women's March, or you clearly do not believe in equity for women and diverse groups. Not everybody feels comfortable marching, but they may still feel strongly about equity for women. But anyway, as soon as you start thinking or speaking in absolute terms and have that you're with us or you're against us mentality, conflict. And then there's needs. When you either ignore someone else's needs or you confuse needs and desires. So, as far as I'm concerned, Kate Spade handbags need, but my husband tells me they're a desire. As soon as there's that kind of confusion, you also have conflicts. And all of these appear again and again and again in the workplace. Perceptions can be an ingredient of conflict. There's self-perceptions. Do I feel confident in myself and in my ability to do my job? There's how I perceive the other party. Do I perceive my employee as capable or having good intent or bad intent? Similar with the manager. My manager doesn't like me. My manager, is stacking the odds against me. Conflict. Perceptions of threat. If someone feels that their reputation or job security is in jeopardy, it can be a major source of conflict. Let's talk about power, wanting to control behaviors in others, micromanagement. I'm actually involved in a mentorship program where my mentee is a very serious perfectionist, and he wants to be at a point where he works on his business rather than in it, but he's afraid to give up that control. He wants to be able to micromanage every aspect of the day-to-day, which of course prevents him from advancing in the direction he wants to advance in. And it also leads to conflict with his employees. He feels he can't trust them, and the employees feel that he doesn't see them as trustworthy, and so they don't enjoy their job. Inflexibility. Again, there's that my way or the highway syndrome. I say jump, you need to say how high. You don't question me in any way. That unwillingness to compromise can lead to conflicts. And generations. Need I say any more? How many comedy skits, cartoons, memes have been created about the generation gap? Boomers see millennials as entitled brats who are helicopter parented through life. Millennials use boomer as kind of a way to put someone down. That's what my kids say to me all the time. Anytime I disagree with a single thing they say, their comment to me is, okay, boomer. And trust me, that's not a compliment. Means I'm just entrenched in these old-fashioned ways of thinking. I'm outdated. I don't know how to take it to the next level. Conflict right there. So now that we've gone over some of the sources of potential sources of conflict, and I'm sure there are many more, and you can feel free to throw them in chat if you feel there are other sources that I have not mentioned, and we can go over them. Let's talk about myths and facts when it comes to conflict. Myth. Conflict is only at work. I just gave you an example with my own kids who tell me all the time that, I don't get them. I don't understand them because I'm way too old and outdated and old-fashioned in my ways. And I think that they're privileged and entitled and don't understand the value of hard work. So conflict occurs in almost every aspect of life. It's not just at work. Conflict is dysfunctional in the workplace. It can be, but as we're going to learn, when handled correctly, it can also be the source of progress and growth and positive change and affirmation. Conflict represents communication breakdown. Well, sometimes it does, but sometimes it doesn't. It really depends on the situation. People can communicate very clearly and still be in conflict with each other. If avoided, conflict will eventually go away. The ostrich syndrome. I'm going to put my head in the sand and pretend this conflict doesn't exist, and eventually things will die down. unfortunately never happens, even if on the surface the conflict doesn't exist. Most likely, by avoiding it, you're bottling up a lot of resentment and anger that's going to manifest itself in some other not very productive way. Conflict always results in a winner and a loser. Well, if you have that uncompromising my way or the highway, I say jump, you say how high approach, maybe. But if handled as I believe it should be, conflict is usually about compromise that doesn't have a clear winner or a clear loser other than your business, which is going to be able to function much better when conflict is resolved. Negative styles of conflict. When can conflict be really bad? Well, when there are three types of people: firecrackers, people who give you the cold shoulder, and the backstabbers. Firecrackers, the ones who just blow up out of anger. I remember one particular place that I worked where my boss used to regularly, I kid you not, throw telephones at me. People like that usually apologize, but you know it's going to happen again and again and again. Someone with that kind of personality is going to snap, and it's just a matter of when. Then there's that cold shoulder, the two people who take pride in not communicating with each other. Contests to see who's going to hold out the longest. I'll show you. I'm not going to talk to you forever and a day, or I'm going to politely give you one-word answers to everything without really communicating. So you're going to know exactly how angry I am, and I'm going to make you feel miserable and uncomfortable. And then there's the backstabbing. This is when being multilingual always hits me, because there's a wonderful Chinese saying, 口欲心面, means it means honey-tongued and dagger-hearted. And I always think about that with backstabbing. People who are nice to you, and then behind your back, you get the knife. Notice, by the way, that all of these negative styles of conflict are also styles of conflict that are very negative in personal relationships. Like I said, conflict is not just about conflict in the workplace. It's also about conflict with people we care about and love, our family, our friends. Anyway, then there's the social zinger. The people who like to publicly kind of throw out those verbal darts. Oh, come on, I was just teasing. Come on, you're being too sensitive. The gaslighting type thing. The trivia fights, battling over the little things, not seeing the small stuff, and therefore never really getting to the big issues because you're arguing too much about minutia. And then, oh my God, those people who have to have the last words. My dad, God, I loved him to death, but that was him. Always had to have the final word, or the conflict was not going to be over. All of these are very negative ways to come into conflict with each other. So how can you avoid that negative conflict? How can you turn conflict around and maybe make it more of a positive? 3 W's of communication. The who. Don't allow yourself excuses for not speaking to the key person. Don't talk behind your boss's back. Go and talk to your boss. Don't talk behind the employee's whose coworker's back. Go talk to the employee. Don't hide your head in the sand. Deal with the problem. The when. When you have conflict, it is best to discuss this issue within 24 hours. The longer you let something kind of go on, the less immediate it is going to seem. The person who you came into conflict with, who you might want to have that conversation, might not even realize that they were a source of conflict, and you might be bringing up more conflict after 24 hours than you would have had you brought it up sooner. Which doesn't mean you need to go, and we're going to talk about this down the road, immediately after being aggrieved, because sometimes when, you know, your emotions are at a peak, you're not going to be able to communicate your feelings well. So letting it marinate a little bit is a good thing, but you don't want to go more than 24 hours. And you want to be able to prepare your thoughts. You want to know what you're going to say. You're going to want to think about it. And approach it in the right way. We're going to talk about all of this more later. I keep saying that, but just to remind you, where are you going to communicate? Neutral location, equal footing. No one should have the upper hand. Resolving conflict always begins with listening. Paraphrasing is a good thing. By paraphrasing, I mean you say to someone, so if I understand you correctly, you're saying that. So you're taking what they're saying and putting it into your own words and making sure that way that you're both on the same page. But you want to let the speaker finish speaking before you interrupt with your paraphrase. And if the speaker says, no, that's not what I'm saying at all, and starts getting irritated at you, just ask them, okay, would you mind then just re-explaining, because I'm not sure I'm getting the drift. You don't want to overuse paraphrasing because it can come across as condescending. If you constantly say, okay, so what you really mean is, but used judiciously, it can be a really good technique to ensure that everyone understands each other when you're trying to resolve this conflict. Then there's criticism. Criticism is a bad rap, but when you use criticism constructively, it can be very positive. Constructive criticism should be applied to the performance that needs improvements and should focus on the issue, not the person. I'm going to go back to personal stuff. When you're raising kids, one of the things you learn is when a child does something wrong, you tell them their behavior was bad. The child is not bad. And it's the same thing when you're dealing with the workplace conflict. You don't tell the person you're a terrible person. You're going to say what you did was problematic. You're a good person, but how you handled this, how you approached this was not as good as it could have been. You want to plan any criticism that you intend to levy ahead. You want to handle it with kid gloves. You want to use what's called the sandwich method. This can be really helpful. The sandwich method means you are wrapping negative feedback in praise. So you're going to start out with something positive. You know, I really like the way you do X, Y, Z. Then you say, however, you know, something that maybe you didn't realize came across the way it shouldn't is, you know, QRX. And then you again end with words of appreciation. But listen, whoops, sorry about that. Anyway, you know, I really think you're a good person. The final thing on that last slide, without bothering to go back to it again, was I talked about performance appraisals. Performance appraisals are what we normally think of as reviews. And I've done a lot of studies of reviews, and they often are not effective. Research shows that 51% of people do not agree with their reviews, which means they were taken by surprise with what they heard, and no one should ever be taken by surprise with the review. Ways to ensure that performance appraisals, that reviews are effective and therefore help to resolve conflicts are you give your employee kind of the onus of responsibility. You have them maybe write up how they're thinking they're performing. So when you see what they're saying prior to reviewing them, you have a pretty good idea of what they're feeling. And if there's any difference between how you're feeling about the employee's performance and they're feeling about the employee's performance, you can approach it directly. You also should use very targeted, specific words when you are reviewing someone's performance. Don't tell them that they're good or that something needs improvement. That's nebulous and annoying, and where are you going to go with it? So instead of good or excellent, you might want to say this person exhibits really strong team playing characteristics. Additionally, there shouldn't just be one review, which I remember when I worked at a large law firm, there was that one review you would have every year. Everyone dreaded it and everyone was nervous about it. You really should be reviewing people formally and informally with little mini reviews or words of praise or meetings to kind of use that sandwich method of criticism throughout the year. Again, no one should be taken by surprise or feel really nervous about the one big review. All right, destructive criticism, as opposed to things that we were talking about using those 3 C's, etc. Destructive criticism is intentionally used. You want to hurt someone. It causes conflicts. It attacks the person versus their performance or behavior. So the person is bad, not what they did. Often we see destructive criticism used in politics, particularly since the last, I would say, 4 years. It's gotten really, really bad, where people are deliberately throwing mud at each other. And often it's a result of anger. Acting out of anger is never constructive conflict resolution. So you want to be proactive, not reactive. All right, now that we've discussed that, 8 steps to conflict resolution that I kind of came up with. Again, if I'm not speaking about something that you think would be a great step to conflict resolution, please throw it in the chat so we can discuss it. Number 1, you want to create an effective atmosphere for conflict resolution, which means I've used that prepare word a whole lot. You want to prepare for the conflict. Oops, sorry about that. You want to prepare for the conflict resolution. You don't want to wing it. You want to think about your approach. You want to jot down some thoughts, let those thoughts marinate a little bit, maybe even rehearse in front of a mirror. Think every time you say something when you're rehearsing, how you believe the person you're talking to is going to respond. I know a lot of times when I have conflict with someone, I know the person well enough to guess pretty accurately how they will respond to what I say. And that can really help you be constructive and positive in your approach. You want to allow time for your conflict resolution. This is not something you want to initiate on a 15-minute, water cooler break or something. You need to schedule a conflict resolution meeting the same way you would schedule any other meeting. It is that important because it will impact how effectively your business runs. You want to avoid distractions. This goes without saying, but your cell phone should be off. You should, if you're in the office, tell your assistant, please make sure I'm not interrupted during this time. You should not be checking your emails in between talking to someone. You want to give them your full focus and energy and let them know that they're important and that this is important to you. You also probably don't want to do this when you are really hungry. So lunchtime is not a good time to have a meeting, because if you're going to be distracted by hunger pains, or the person you're talking to is thinking to themselves, oh my God, this is taking up my lunch break. Now, when am I going to get something to eat? You're not going to be as effective as you could be. Pick a non-threatening place. Worst thing you can do is tell someone, can you come into my office for a minute? Because that gives people very bad memories of being dragged into the principal's office in school. A safe, neutral environment is best if you are able. I always think going into a hotel conference room or a quiet coffee shop during off hours is a positive thing. It neutralizes the situation a bit. If you can't do that, then I would say a conference room within your office space that doesn't belong to any one individual, so no one has the upper hand, is a good thing to do. We talked about preparing. You want to very carefully choose those initial comments and the atmosphere of partnership and cooperation and collaboration that you would like to instill. Nothing you say should be by accident. This should be proactive rather than reactive. And it's also good to do a kind of your turn, my turn. We talked about this a little bit about activating those listening skills and making sure not to interrupt anybody. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in the next slide as well. So your turn. You tell the other person, hey, you go first. We kind of got an issue here. I'd like to hear what you think about this. And that's a really good way to begin, because it disarms the other person. It immediately makes things less tense, makes the other person feel like they're being heard and not just jumped on. You want to activate your listening skills. Interrupting to get your point across is never a good thing. And it also shows that you do not care about that person. You only care about being heard instead of hearing. Again, that paraphrasing, really key here. So if I understand correctly, what you're saying is blah, 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 to avoid any miscommunication. Then you get to the my turn. All right, I really appreciate you're giving me your point of view. If you don't mind, can I just give you my side of the story now? And you want to describe what the problems are without casting blame. So once again, this is neutral. This is, hey, here's kind of a problem that we're both going to approach as partners. What can we do to resolve this? Not, you were wrong. This was really bad. So this again is a good way to be constructive when approaching conflict. You want to be able to clarify your perceptions. So is this conflict one isolated incident where you say, normally you're such a good communicator, but this time, man, you ignored me completely for days and seemed to not care about what I thought about something? Or is this conflict another in a long list of conflicts you've had with this individual? Approach would be different depending. You want to make sure that you're very clear about what the conflict is about and what it is not about. You don't want to get off on a tangent and escalate the conflict by bringing in a whole lot of outside things that have nothing to do with the heart of the matter. And you want to organize the points of the conflict from major to minor. So you're focusing on the big things first, and then those small things that might be irritating, but they're still just small things, don't become the focus of your conversation. Number 3, focus on individual and shared needs. Talked before about how I personally think my Kate Spade purses are needs. My husband thinks they're desires. It's really important that you don't confuse what you need to be able to perform your work effectively and for your company to be able to run smoothly with what you would like in an ideal world. You always want to put yourself in the other person's shoes and ask yourself what they might be thinking. Why might they have reacted a certain way? How are they going to respond when you're talking to them about what's bothering you? And you also want to identify areas of common interest, because when people are aligned around that common interest, it will once again sort of soften any criticism or blows and create unity and a spirit of collaboration. If I happen to know, for example, that the person I'm talking to is a dog lover like me, I might actually start out, hey, just before we even start, got to ask you, how's Sadie the sheepdog doing? She's so cute. I love all your posts on Facebook. Again, starts out making someone feel like you're on their side and you share things with this person so you're not always in conflict with them and you're able to resolve this. Look to the future, not the past. Past is prologue, right? Don't let the past rule your thinking. Don't be so irritated by past problems that you aren't able to move forward and see a way that you can get past the past, or you're going to be stuck in the mud. However, you want to learn from the past. You want to remind each other of positive times and things that have, gone well. That sandwich approach can be really useful with that. When you want to start out with words of praise, then you talk about what's bothering you, and then you go back into those words of praise. If someone just feels that a conflict is unresolvable and that you're always going to have some resentment and anger, there's no progress. Number 5, generate options. You want to be able to prepare some options in advance of how to resolve this. And you want to focus on options that deal with shared needs. What do both of you need to function well in the workplace? And you want to get the other person's opinion about this. You want to seek options. You want to find that common ground and value your past experiences and time working together. So you're working, again, from a place of partnership and collaboration. You may have a conflict, but in resolving the conflict, you're not conflicting. You're finding the things that work well and building from there. Doables and stepping stones. You know that saying about pick the low-hanging fruit first really applies to conflict resolution. You don't want to try to tackle the most thorny and challenging issues before. You could first resolve things that are easy to fix, because once you've kind of checked some items off that conflict resolution list and things are running smoother, it's going to be easier to tackle the really, really big problems. And you want to start with small steps. There's that saying about a journey of 1,000 miles beginning with a single step, and it really is true. Enough of those small steps, when you continue to take those small steps, will eventually lead to a big journey and big changes. Those doables, by the way, they're not ends, they're just steps. So what I mean by that is when you come up with things that you're able to do to kind of resolve a conflict, I am able to make sure that I check my email every single day, at least twice a day. So I'm not missing, major things on my to-do list. That's a doable, but that's not kind of the way you resolve the conflict. It's a step to resolving a greater conflict, which is about how you're communicating, in this case, how you are responding to someone else's requests and calls for actions. How are you going to be more responsive in the workplace is the bigger thing that you're going to be able to tackle, but checking your email more regularly might be one step on that process. And it's a doable step. You want to strive for mutual benefit agreements. I keep saying it, but you want to establish partnership. You want to be collaborators in this conflict resolution. You want to create a new beginning and focus on solutions, not problems. The point is to arrive at a solution so that the workplace runs smoothly, so that everyone is happy and fulfilled and working effectively. The point is not, I'm angry and I'm going to throw out there everything I'm thinking. Finally, number 8, maybe the most important here and maybe the most difficult, which is flexibility. That's really your key to conflict resolution. My way or the highway doesn't work. Being conciliatory, apologizing, even when you don't feel like it, even when you feel like you were wronged. Conceding, giving in a little bit. Win some, lose some, okay. I think I can give you this if you give me that. Expressing positive feelings for the other person and initiating that win-win approach. The handshake, the feeling like, hey, we're in this together. We're talking about this because we both want the same thing. Really is key to getting past conflict and being able to work together toward a common goal. So really, those are just kind of my main points that I wanted to touch on. Maybe the best thing to do before I go into scenarios, because I have a few fun scenarios that I thought we could work on since we're a small group and see how people would resolve various types of conflict, is to see if there are any questions either in the chat, where it doesn't look like it, but it's a small enough group. If anyone wants to throw something out there or tell me something I missed or tell me if you disagree with me about anything, it would be great. Anybody?
Well, I'll start, Dawn. Thank you so much for that, overview presentation and the specifically the pieces of advice in regards to how to handle, that conflict. So important that it is timely. Did you want to go through the scenarios right now with the folks?
Yeah, I thought the scenarios would be great. I just wanted to see first if anyone had any questions or anything else they wanted to throw out there. Yeah. And I want to tell people, please don't be shy. I was a teacher. I had no problem calling on people just to get some interactivity here. Anyone?
Don, this is Len. If I can reinforce something that you said,
Mhm.
there is a book that was written in the early 90s called SAP. It's about relationships in the workplace.
SAP?
ZAPP.
ZAP. Okay.
And one of the points that it makes is that relationships are kind of like bank accounts. You have to put something in before you take something out.
Yes.
So not only creating a friendly workplace, but the conversation needs to start with, you know, I really enjoy the way that you approach problems,
Mhm.
but this last situation has created a lot of conflict, that kind of a thing. So making a deposit before you make a withdrawal.
I love that.
And you mentioned that in a different context, but I just wanted to reinforce that's very valuable.
I so agree with that. And I also want to piggyback on something that you just said, which is that at the end of the day, whatever you're doing in the workplace, whatever product you're producing, whether, I mean, I had a restaurant, so yeah, we were serving food and giving people great customer service. But at the end of the day, what a workplace is really about is relationships. And those relationships have to function in order for you to be able to deliver that product effectively. And what you were saying on about kind of putting in a little bit to take out a little bit is all about building those good relationships. So 100%. I see we had something in the chat here from Carol. You're spot on, Dawn. It is so difficult to engage with people that think they're always right and won't take constructive criticism. Absolutely. My way or the highway, bad way to start any relationship and sure way to end any relationship, including a working relationship.
Right.
Any other?
Nina has her hand up. Go ahead, Nina.
Hi, so I have a question on what you may suggest for someone who is a chronic interrupter and how to get them on the same page of, hey, this is the tips or methods we should use to resolve this. But, you know, obviously they're not on these workshops, they're not reading these books, they're not. So what like little steps would be good to kind of get them to that point and kind of make it work?
It's an excellent question. So I'm going to throw something out there. And I also invite anybody else who's a participant to share things that have worked for them. So I am part of this massive Jewish family where interrupting is a sport. Everybody has an opinion and everyone wants it heard. And it can be really off-putting. And what I've noticed is that people who interrupt, like in my family, don't realize they are interrupting. They're just really excited and intent about what they want to say. So they don't get what they're doing. So that in and of itself should be a conflict that you're trying to resolve. And I would set aside a meeting to talk with this individual. And I would start out, again, be disarming and you know, say, you know, I really appreciate how enthusiastic you are and how, you know, how personally you take this work, how much it means to you. But I think sometimes maybe in doing so, you may not realize that you are shutting other people down by, you know, coming in here, and people may not even be aware they're doing it. That's how I would start. And I would, you know, make sure that it's on this person's radar that what you really need from them is to listen to you. And once they're aware of it, you can bring it up the next time that person does it. It's, you know, listen, remember we had that conversation right now. You're kind of interrupting me while I'm in the middle of talking. You don't shout it. You don't make the person feel like an idiot. You maybe come up jokingly, hey, maybe I can do an ear poll or some kind of symbol every time you're doing this, because I don't think you're totally aware of the effect you're having. There are also really good professional development classes on something called the feminist business model, which is something that the Center for Women in Enterprise models itself after. And the feminist business model has less to do with things that you would think of as traditionally feminist and more to do with those soft skills like being an active listener. So that's my thought about this. Does anyone else have anything to add to that?
Yes, if anyone else has something to add, don't be shy.
Yeah.
Feel free to, you can raise your hand or go ahead and unmute yourself and jump in.
Yeah, because this is a
You're welcome to
conversation.
interrupt us.
It's not, you know, that I'm dictating to you these ironclad rules. It's really a dialogue and some thoughts to inspire maybe some action. So I'd love to hear your ideas.
I think Lisa has something to add. Go ahead, Lisa.
Sure, thank you. I've seen it where to structure the meeting for the interrupter is that you have the ball and you toss the ball. Of course, that's hard to do now when we're virtual, but at the same time, it could be that everybody gets a turn. And when that person speaks, no one else gets to until, and there's, even if there's a timer that's just running, that can be a way to allow people to get their voice heard, especially for the one that really doesn't get their voice heard because of the interrupter. Thanks for the thumbs up, Nina.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great idea.
I was going to ask about a situation where I feel that people are coming into the conversation on the defensive because of experiences that they carry with them. And unbeknownst to me, they have this, I'll call it baggage for lack of a better term, and they are, a conflict arises that you're not aware of because they've not engaged it or said anything, but you find out about it after the fact. So how can you gauge where someone's starting from on an initial meeting would be something I'd be very curious to kind of draw on for a second.
That is a really excellent question. You know, we're all socially situated. We're all kind of born and raised in a particular kind of environment, particular triggers and things that are going to set us off. And I'm not sure there's any surefire way of knowing what someone's social, how they were socially situated until there is an actual conflict or a blow up. So I think, honestly, that the best way, you might not know, and often you won't know if someone's coming in with a particular mindset until there is a conflict. But then when you have that conflict resolution and you practice that my turn, your turn, you may find out some really important things. And then that also brings up kind of some really interesting stuff about styles of communication and how you might want to moderate your style when you're dealing with a particular kind of person. Like there's one person I work with who I learned from experience is extremely sensitive when she feels that when she sent an email or forwarded something and I might not have received it or don't remember it. I learned not to say, I don't think you sent that. I don't remember receiving that. It causes immediate upset and conflict because this person feels like they're so on top and try so hard always to be forwarding and sending and keeping you in the loop. So I've learned how to approach that with this particular individual in a way that I might not with somebody else. Anyone else have thoughts about that?
Well, this is Len, if I can interrupt again, speaking of interrupting. You mentioned something in the beginning about how to tell where people are in their lives when they come to meet with you in this conflict. And there is this theory of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And it's a five level step. And everybody goes through those levels. And it starts with the physical needs, the food and the shelter and that sort of thing. And it moves up into the psychological needs, being accepted by your peers, and then finally feeling that self-worth, that I am accomplished. I have this self-confidence that carries me forward. And I think it's all part of us analyzing the relationships around you. Where are this individual person in my organization? Where are they? Are they in the beginning and don't have enough money to make all their needs? Are they looking for acceptance in the rest of the group? In which case, a negative comment in the middle of a group could really crush this individual. But if they're on the upper level of their self-satisfaction, if you will, and they feel really confident, then you can approach from a more direct standpoint, like, hey, Fred, that didn't work out so well this time. Why don't you come up with a better idea? You know, that kind of thing. So understanding where people are in their hierarchy of needs, if you will, can help you devise a more productive conversation or criticism or modification, if you will, of your approach.
I 100% agree with what you say. And I want to also throw something else in there. I think, once again, we're all socially situated. And if you know that you are particularly sensitive about something or certain things don't work for you, I would also encourage you to be open about it to your colleagues and your managers. I'm just, again, thinking about things that work for me and don't. One thing that does not work for me in the workplace at all, if someone who's in a superior position to me sends me an email and says, can we have a meeting? We need to have a meeting tomorrow, and doesn't tell me what it's about, I will immediately jump to assume I did something wrong. I'm about to be fired. And I'll sit and obsess about it. And then I will approach that meeting on the defensive, angry, upset. I often will not hear what's said to me, and it will take me days to calm down. So that's something I have in various positions let people I've worked for know is, listen, if you do want to talk to me about something, just let me know what it's about in advance, so that I'm not immediately creating scenarios in my mind. So if there's something you're particularly sensitive about, don't be shy. It'll help you feel happier in the workplace, and it will make for a more productive workplace overall.
Right. There is a question in the chat, Dawn, from Heather. And Heather asked, how do you handle an employee that does not want to follow the process properly and 100% for processing invoices? And when you try to explain them why it's important to follow the process to a T and it's entirely, all you get from them is that, oh, you're micromanaging me, when in reality, that is the process for completing the job. That's just how it works. Also, the process has built in checks and balances to make sure things are accurate, and them not following the process is evident because the invoices they're completing are not accurate 90% of the time.
Yeah, that's a really tough one, because that goes to the heart of, what your business is. It can actually come back to really hurt you for, with taxes and legal stuff. So that's something you cannot take lightly. And I think that I actually see someone, I'm going to let someone else talk here. Great.
Yeah. Lisa put up a suggestion. Lisa, would you like to share with the group?
Sure. I saw that the checks and balances were noted, but I was asking if the process can be modified for an invoice review for the team to learn and reinforce the adaptations. And okay, if you get called out in the meeting 3 times, you might recognize that there's a challenge. But if there's no review that's going to have any kind of consequence, I wonder if they don't feel there's value to the steps of the process. But the check and balance is in place, but they're not looking at the check and balance because they're choosing to work outside of it. So now maybe change the check and balance and have a meeting where it's a review, and you pick and choose, and you pick on somebody else, not only the same person. You have more than one invoice preparer if possible.
Yeah, I think that's really good. And I also think sometimes I'm thinking back to when I had my restaurant, and I had a manager who worked for me who made me insane because he did not think it was important to collect all kinds of things that you needed for employees, basically for their files. And so I had files of employees that were missing critical information that if I was ever called out, I could have lost my business over it. So sometimes there are people who think this stuff are just minor details. The fact that this person is saying you're micromanaging me makes me think this person thinks that there are several different approaches that are all equally good. And maybe in the course of these meetings that were just suggested, consequences could be discussed. This is what happens when an invoice is done in the wrong way. Here are some examples of invoices that were improperly completed, and this was the result. That sometimes just showing what the consequences of that, or letting someone realize how important it is to do something the right way, is critical. And I also hate to say it, but sometimes when someone has that view, which sounds a little bit like a my way or the highway view about those invoices, and it could hurt your business, it may be at a point where that person doesn't come to, you may have to consider letting them go. I mean, there are conflicts that both parties have to be willing to work and resolve them. And if you're giving this person the tools they need to complete those invoices correctly, and the training they need, and the understanding of how important and valuable this is, and they're not buying it, this may not be someone you want in your business.
Right. So I wonder, Dawn, how would you one way that I heard people can approach this as, you are a manager, and now we were talking to people about growth mindset and coaching, the coaching approach to working with employees and all of that. At some point, there might be the need for retraining, right? Instead of just picking one or two things that are wrong here and there, and then there's two other things that are wrong maybe next time that the invoices get done or so on. Maybe there just need to be a complete retraining. Like, let's just clean the slate, let's retrain you. That takes time and effort, and would the employee even be welcoming of that? Like, how would you even approach that? I mean, you're kind of trying to save their job in some ways.
What I would, it depends. I don't know in this scenario how valuable that employee is in other ways. And if this is like the one thing that prevents this person from being the world's most perfect employee, one thing you can do is it might be good to have retraining for everybody dealing with invoices. So you're not just, zeroing in on this one person and making them kind of be put on the defensive. Again, in that retraining, I would emphasize why this is so important to your business and why there aren't multiple ways of doing the invoices, that there's this one way that it has to be done because XYZ, and because when you submit taxes, whatever it is, you really need to be very, very clear on this. And if the person continues to fight you on it, you've really got to make some hard decisions about whether this is an employee you really want on board. You can give someone lots of chances. You can have lots of opportunities to resolve conflict, from retraining to, regular reviews, both formal and informal, where you bring things up and use that sandwich praise, criticism, praise process. But at the end of the day, if nothing is working, it may not be someone you want to keep.
Yeah. And when it comes to processing and processes, I think it's helpful to, at least at the beginning, while you're trying to correct the behavior or the steps that are, or the learning, right? Because it's not just the behavior, it's a very specific set of steps that this person is giving to do a particular job, or, very specific tasks, right? I wonder if, setting up weekly, like a review where this person is given a chance to review their own work and identify some of the things that could have been fixed. I don't know, I'm just thinking that, you talked about feedback within 24 hours, but when you're retraining someone, I think it's important to do weekly check-ins, or where you can review everything all at once and give them an opportunity to review, to listen to the feedback in a way where they're open to it, because they know that meeting is coming, right?
Yeah.
It's not like a surprise. Hey, by the way, that stuff you did yesterday, there's this error, this error, this error. No. Hey, by the way, on Wednesday when we meet, we're going to review everything together and see how the process is, how well you're learning this process that we need you to complete for us, right?
Yeah, that's really good.
That's really where the rubber meets the road.
And then, yeah, and I love that. And you're also therefore not, again, taking this person by surprise with the once a year review. It becomes, part of that regular thing. I'm also thinking, Sam, based on what you were saying, and thinking about things I did as an educator in the classroom, maybe having a checklist too for this employee and for everybody, not just to this employee. This is a checklist. Every single time you complete an invoice for the next 2 months until this becomes, habitual, I would like you to hand me in this checklist showing me that you followed all of these steps and checked them off.
Right.
And it would be interesting to see if the employee you're mentioning just checks off those boxes, but isn't really doing it, in which case you have some good opportunities for discussion.
Right.
So
I
really
see
good
Nina
stuff.
has her hand up.
Who?
Go ahead, Nina.
Oh, sorry.
It just made me think of something too. And when I was in corporate, it kind of tied into what Heather was dealing with. And it was interesting that when it was, because in the particular scenario I was in, it was a management type person. So it was my superior, and I couldn't get the point across of how much time is wasted with the back and forth with the inaccuracies like she's having to deal with. So it was actually somebody, and this was so long ago, I forget who or what position it was, but presenting the situation from a profit loss type of not confrontation, but another word, just kind of presenting it that way, that, okay, every time an invoice has to be corrected, this is costing our profit or lowering our profit by this much. This percentage of what we would have made on ABC job is now reduced because of the time that is taking to now have to go back, refix the invoice times whatever the person that's fixing it is paid, times, how many times are they going to have to do this? Had it just been done, the way it was supposed to in the first place. And it was like, until that point was made, it was like the light bulb finally hit on that, because he was thinking, well, I don't have time for this. You guys figure it out. I don't have, I'm a manager. I don't have to be accurate. That's what you guys do. But then it didn't hit that guy until you mentioned how much money was being lost. And it's like, okay, now you're responsible for that. So it was like a little bit of a switch on perspective. So I don't know if that'll help, with Heather's situation.
Yeah, exactly. And as Lisa was saying, the impact of your efforts, the why, instead of just do it because I say so. This is why it's important. And this is what happens when it's not done correctly. And even with the profits, it could be interesting to go a step further. And by the way, does everyone remember your salaries and your bonuses are based on our profit? So the business is being hurt, and so are you. As an individual, there's a reason we all want the business to be profitable. So I think this is cool. So I think because it's a small group, I'm just going to throw something out there. My original intent with this, I had created a bunch of scenarios for us to go over of different types of conflict that were, artificial, that I sort of invented in my head based on things I did, which I'm still more than happy to do as a group. Or would you rather just have this free-flowing conversation? What do y'all think?
I'm curious if the conversations that you might draw by your scenarios will be thought-provoking in that it's not our own world, which sometimes we get caught up in, and being able to step out of it and have it be an opportunity to just kind of look at it from an outside perspective might actually create new ideas.
All right, let's do it. Sam, do you have them? Let's put them up and let's kind of go through these. I have a whole bunch of them. They're all kind of fun. And
Oh, did I freeze or did you freeze?
I believe that Dawn froze.
Okay.
Mid-sentence, I was like, wait.
Sometimes I freeze over. So
wrong.
Yeah, she's frozen
I'm
on
sure
my end too.
All right, there you are. We got you back.
By the way, my internet connection, I'm being told, is unstable. So if I get out of here, someone can feel free, Sam, if you want to continue reading through these until I get back on. So Kara got off on the wrong foot with the new coworker, Danielle. Danielle asked for Kara's help responding to a customer inquiry, but Kara declined to lend a hand because she was working under her own tight deadline. There's been tension between the two ever since. Now, Kara needs Danielle's help on a major project, but Danielle is blowing her off. How should Kara handle this? So coworkers, colleagues, equal kind of footing. Thoughts?
Anyone on the call, feel free to unmute yourself and take a
Jump
stab at
right
it. No
in.
wrong answers.
I have one saying, Dawn, can you please paste that? I assume that means the.
Missed a couple words in it, and I'm out of context, so I wanted to reread it. So.
Okay, so I'll copy and paste it into the chat. Is that what you're asking for?
Yes,
Here we
please.
go.
I missed a couple of words, so I
Okay,
didn't
no
catch all
problem.
of it,
Here we
and
go.
so I can't figure out.
You didn't cut the Kara.
Oh,
started
sorry.
with
Oh, whoopsie. Hold on, I'll do it again. 1 second. Okay, here we go. It's on the chat now. So
I was looking at the chat and our faces. I didn't see that you had a screen.
That's okay. No worries. No worries.
What do y'all think?
Then
Has
I
anyone
see you
been in
unmuted
this
yourself to have a
situation?
thought.
That's kind of complicated. We don't know how Kara perceives the importance of Danielle's task. So she obviously wasn't informed about what Danielle was working on, or she wouldn't have asked her in the first place. I think the situation here is that we need to diffuse this tension between the two. So how do we do that? Does Kara recognize?
So Kara says to Danielle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, she's freezing on us again.
Yeah.
Don, could you repeat what you just said once you get back to us? There we go.
I'm back. There I am. Sorry, guys. So yeah. So what do we do? So because Len said that Kara may not have. There may be some kind of misperception there. Danielle feels that her work was extremely important. Kara doesn't think it was that important, and it wasn't that big a deal, maybe. Or maybe she did think it was important, but just was busy with her own thing. It says here she's working on her own tight deadline. So whatever the situation was, Kara felt that her own tight deadline mattered more than whatever it was Danielle had to add. How should we approach this? How do we resolve this problem? Because presumably these people are going to have to work together. And right now it's very uncomfortable.
Well, it couldn't hurt to start with an apology regardless.
Apologies, always good, always disarming. So the two of them meet. We pick our neutral location. Hey, this great little coffee shop, Let's go kind of when it's a little quieter. Maybe we could talk and share a latte, maybe. If Danielle.
I'm also curious, Don, does Danielle have anyone else to go to for questions?
I don't know. What do you think?
Is Kara the only one she can go to for questions? I mean, if that's the case, I don't think Kara should ever be able to refuse helping her because she's the only one that Danielle can go to for help. But if Danielle has other people to go to for help, perhaps she could have suggested someone else to assist her in that instance. But always starting with it, I'm sorry, I'm not able to help you at this time with this particular question you have because I'm on my, I have this very important deadline. And it's not that I don't want to help you. I really, really can't. Can you reach out so-and-so might be able to help you.
Yeah.
But if she's the only one, then that's a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, totally different. One is she's the only one. And the other is you could have gone to 1,000 different people who didn't have these tight deadlines. But maybe Danielle had a reason to go to Kara.
Yeah. And it sounds like it's a new relationship. So they had no understanding of where they were coming from. So now it's they've put their stakes in the ground and they've taken a side, but that's not collaborative or constructive for a workplace. So Kara, who has been there longer, looks like we didn't get off on the right foot. How about we try this again? And, I felt that you didn't understand I had a deadline and I'm sorry if I didn't handle it well. And the apology, I think, would do a lot for the two of these young ladies. Or old ladies, I don't know.
Apologies are always so helpful. And it always amazes me because I'll apologize at the drop of a hat to care about being right so much. I just want to get along with people. But there's so many people who get stuck on those apologies. Does anyone remember, from my aging myself, hopefully not with this group, my kids would have no clue what I'm talking. Remember Happy Days and the Fonz? He could not say I'm sorry ever. Why is that? Why is it so hard?
Yeah, well, there is also a wrinkle in these kinds of relationships. Sometimes you need a third person to reflect for the both of them. And especially if you happen to be the boss of the company, the owner or whatever, and you see these two people having a conflict, this is the point where you would get involved and say, hey, listen, guys, I see you got a problem with your relationship here. You may not realize it, but it's affecting everybody, and we got to work together here. What's the problem, Danielle? What's the problem, Kara? When it's confined to two people, it's a lot more difficult to jump the fence. Why should I apologize to Danielle? She did me wrong. Why should I apologize to Kara? She doesn't deserve an apology. So it's the perspective of understanding that we do have to work together.
Len, you bring up a really good point. I have a way longer PowerPoint presentation that I've done sometimes where I talk about managers and the different types of conflict, which we didn't have time to go into today. Does anyone have any thoughts about when, let's say the manager didn't notice this, would it have made sense for either Kara or Danielle to get the manager involved? And if the manager got involved in this particular situation, do you think it would make things better or would it make it worse at the end of the day?
Depends on the manager.
Yeah, definitely does. I definitely think that that a third person objective viewpoint can help out a lot in situations where two employees have bumped into a wall. I don't see that according to the scenario that you brought up, that we progressed to that seriousness yet. It seems like it was a conflict and one of us took it the wrong way. So how do I deal with my own personal situations like that? I go out of my way to try to not address that situation, but try to understand a little more. Maybe, as you said, just offer a cup of coffee. Let's go sit down and have a cup of coffee and not talk about anything resolving the problem, but more talking about getting to know you, you getting to know me. I just wanted to have a friendly cup of coffee with you. And then we can work into a conversation that says, hey, look, you know, I asked you for some help the other day and I'm sorry it was inconvenient. I maybe took it the wrong way, but you know, we should figure out how to work this out. And basically bringing the tone down to a point where it's manageable on both sides without actually going straight at the problem really first, trying to build up that relationship a little bit stronger.
Yeah, taking the temperature down, I think, is always a good thing as well. Is there anyone who feels that it would have been a good idea to get a manager involved with that one before we go into another one? I think we might have time for maybe one or two more before this ends.
It varies. If it's the week one of her new employment, I don't think the manager needs to get involved. But if it's been ongoing for a few months and there's this ongoing tension, it's not going to be a great work environment moving forward. So I think that at some point it needs to be addressed. And if it's, you know, if it's new, it might just get resolved short term. But if it's lingered, yeah, it might need a third party and the manager might be the right party.
Another thought there, because you'd mentioned if she was a new employee and we have a new coworker here, here's another thought. When you talk to a manager, you don't always have to ask the manager, right, to intercede. What if Danielle, who's new, right, or at least is a new coworker, or maybe Kara's new, what if one of the two of them, whoever was the most new, went to the manager and said, listen, I just need your advice about this. Can you tell me a little bit? You've worked more with Kara or you've worked more with Danielle. this is what happened. I just want to be able to resolve this with her and kind of get along. Do you have any advice for me about how to approach her and why this might have happened? So sometimes you can get advice from a manager that will then help you approach the situation yourself without getting the manager to drag both of you into a room and knock your heads together.
Right. I saw Jack's hand up first for a little while, and then Nina. So Jack, if you want to jump in.
I was just gonna say that, you know, that I would try to handle the situation with that colleague first before getting any manager involved. Because once you get a manager involved and you're just kind of escalating it, and without having that initial discussion, I would think it would probably create more issues down the road than resolve the issue.
Great. Thank you, Jack. That's great input there. And Nina, go ahead.
Yeah, to go along with what Jack said, I was thinking along those lines too. Always approach the person direct, but then if it comes to the manager, maybe an indirect ask to the manager. Something like, well, listen, I need help with such and such project. Who do you recommend would be the person to help me? And you may know that there's only one person, but at least it's now the manager's referral. So now if you have to go back to Kara, now you have, hey, manager so-and-so referred me to you, said you'd be the best person to help me with this, and then take it from there, because now you kind of have a little bit more weight, I guess.
So all good stuff. All right. So just again, there's no one right answer, by the way, to any of these. My hope is that we'll all get you copies of the slide deck, is that you can use some of the techniques that we discussed today going forward to inform how you might want to handle this, if you find that helpful.
Right.
All right.
Which scenario do you want to do, Dawn? We have
let's take a look. Do we want to go into like religion and fun things? I have a really good one.
Religion and fun things.
Let's see. I have one with a manager wondering how this is a good one.
This one with the
Jesse. Yeah, Jesse. Sorry, by the way, with all the names here, I forgot to erase those. It was from another time I did this. All right. Jesse is a very quiet, serious employee who doesn't often smile or laugh. She tends to be very private about her personal life. Although Jessie got along well with her previous employer, Julie, who had a similar personality. Julie has now left the company and Roberta has taken her role. Roberta is very gregarious, loud, and laughs often, and she also tends to be inquisitive about her employees' lives. Jessie has become increasingly uncomfortable around Roberta as she doesn't like being asked about her personal life and feels that too much noise and laughter in the workplace is unprofessional. For her part, Roberta is put off by Jessie's quiet, private nature and regards Jessie as unfriendly. Recently, Roberta reprimanded Jessie for not smiling enough or not making enough small talk with the recent client who visited the office. Jessie feels bullied and defensive. So remember now, Roberta, in this case, these aren't two employees on equal footing, like the last scenario. This is Roberta is in a supervisory position over Jessie and is having issues with Jessie's personality that the other supervisor apparently did not have. What should Jessie do?
Anyone feel free to unmute yourself and jump in.
I think that she has the opportunity to just share what she feels and say, I'm sorry that I'm not that person. And I'm okay with that. And I hope that you can be. And it kind of doesn't call her out. It just says, I'm not that person. And, not saying that you're wrong for wanting me to be. It's just, I'm not.
Right.
Other thoughts?
I don't think she can do that. I don't think her personality is going to be able to allow her to go up to someone she perceives as a bully and say, lay off. I'm not sure what I would do in that situation exactly.
I mean, ideally, that would be great if that could happen. But you're right. If that's not her personality to come out, if she's already very shy, she might have a really hard time confronting this person whom she feels is bullying her or putting her on the defensive. So,
sometimes when you're a shyer person, putting something in writing can be helpful. What would anyone think about Jesse kind of composing an email or even a handwritten note, which sometimes has more gravitas, by the way? Something else I feel anyway, is that when you handwrite something these days, when people are so used to just getting emails, it can have a big impact on someone. What do you think?
That's an interesting approach, Don. Actually, myself, many years ago, when I worked for supervisor, a manager, he managed several departments, and but we were on a call together, and he shushed me. He actually shushed me
Oh my
on
God.
the conference call. And obviously, no one could see him shushing me with his finger in his mouth. And I thought it was so unprofessional. And I mean, I do tend to talk quite a bit, of course, but in that particular instance, I was answering a question. And I understand though that there are things that I think a better approach could have been, there's other hand gestures you could do if you want someone to kind of slow down and don't give away some information perhaps that you wouldn't want to give away in a call. Perhaps speaking ahead of time about what's going to be spoken in the call, what we can and cannot share, would be a great way to avoid that conflict to be there in the first place. Regardless of that, I wrote an email to the manager, and after that, I mean, he called me into his office and he profusely apologized to me. Took me out to lunch, and he was so apologetic. I don't think he realized how bad that was for him to do that to me in particular. I mean, everyone is different, and we didn't have that relationship, where he could just go like this. This is something you do to your kids, you know?
I think when we talk about, I mentioned before about how we're all socially situated. As soon as you said that, I had a visceral reaction. And I think I would just venture to guess that pretty much any woman would have reacted felt the way you did, because that is just so stereotypical of like being shushed or treated as less than or childlike, or you talk too much and what you say is not of importance. So that's also an interesting thing, in that they were not really understanding the way you were socially situated, because this was male and you were female, and maybe even that was helpful. I guess I have another question. So there's the writing might be one way to go about it. Another thought, is it ever appropriate for a supervisor to tell you, you know what, you need to kind of, when you talk to the client, you need to exude a little more warmth. You need to smile a little bit more. Particularly, this is a woman talking to a woman. This is not a guy, again, shushing you or telling you you need to be more womanly, but a man can be differently. It's a woman telling it to a woman. Is it ever appropriate to criticize someone's personality? Would it ever behoove you, if you were criticized like that, to think about how you might want to make some changes?
Yeah, this is Len. I think that it is appropriate, but from a different kind of a context. I had an experience in my career years and years ago, and I was having
personality was a big part.
Yeah, definitely. My boss recognized that I was having I could be more effective in my communications. He sent me to a Carnegie course to learn about developing a conversation, to learn about the elements of public speaking, and also of memory, things like people's names and that sort of things. And he approached it from a standpoint that was constructive. Hey, listen, Len, I want you to, I really would like to see you be more effective in your communications with these individuals. I know of a tool that will really work if you're willing to go to the class and work with these Carnegie folks. I think it'll make you a lot more effective. Now, he didn't come right out and tell me I had no capabilities whatsoever in talking with these people, but he did say, I can help you get better for the long term. And he offered me a new tool. And from that standpoint, I took it as a positive.
Yeah.
So-
Go ahead. Sorry, Sam.
I'm sorry. What I wanted to say is that combining those two approaches, the writing a note, say Jessie kind of writing a note to Roberta, sharing her feelings, like how, she understands that that just sharing that her personality is a little bit more private. However, that she might be willing, perhaps, to get some additional training, or to be able to interact with clients in a way that's more satisfactory to the employer, perhaps. But that's coming from the employee as opposed to the supervisor offering that, which is what Len was talking about, the supervisor approaching it in a different way to get the employee to change their behavior towards the clients.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with that too, because
Wondering, should Jessie be feeling bullied and defensive?
Sorry. Body language is so big part of our communication. So depending on how Roberta approaches that with Jessie, it could be something to encourage her and not to put her down on. So depending on how it's approached, just getting her to kind of see that from that perspective, that it's the body language too, not just the words being used, and that it might be helpful.
Yeah. And I'm just maybe picturing a potential constructive thing where Jessie feels maybe she doesn't feel empowered to knock on Roberta's door and ask for a face-to-face, but where she at least puts together a thoughtful email that she, by the way, what my advice, if you ever do put something in writing, write it and then do not send it. Do not put the recipient's name in it so you accidentally send it. Let it sit overnight. Check it the next day. Remember that 24-hour rule? So you want to get it out quickly, but you also don't want to do it in the heat of the moment where your emotions are running very high. Like if I wrote an email about being shushed, my first email would be probably something that would get me fired.
I think it took me 2 days to send it. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So think about it and then reread it the next day with a fresh pair of eyes and resend it. So assuming, let's say, Jessie does that. And then Roberta calls her in and says, listen, I'm not asking you, to wholesale change your personality, but I do think that we're in the customer service business. And in, certain situations, you're coming, maybe you don't realize it, but what you see as shy, or maybe what is shy, is coming off as off-putting and a lack of warmth and caring. So maybe there are ways that you can kind of be conscious of. We were talking before about body language, projecting a certain body language, of smiling a little bit more, of doing a few more things that really might help make a better impression on clients and get you more clients or improve your position in the company, whatever. I do think that maybe there are times where a Jessie would do well to think about their personality and how it might be being perceived as others, and whether or not it made sense to try to change a little bit.
Great. Well, I think we're just out of time for today's webinar. Dawn, any last words or insight that you want to share with the group before we close out today?
So again, I guess the word of the day is compromise. No winners, no losers. Keep your eye on the donut, not on the hole. The donut is a productive work environment where everybody feels empowered and happy to go into work every day and all working toward that same goal. The goal is not to shoot your mouth off, vent your emotions, get someone in trouble, make someone feel yay big. It's to work together toward a common goal. And if you approach it with that spirit in mind, you can't go wrong.
Thank you so much, Don. We really appreciate your words of wisdom and to share with us this presentation today. For everyone here joining us, I placed on the chat a link to our survey. You would have received also an email through Eventbrite. Please fill out our evaluation for today. We love your feedback. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Have a wonderful day and a great week.
Bye, everyone. Great seeing you.
Bye-bye.